Mentally Morbid.
This podcast represents the opinions of the speakers and guests to the show. By listening to this podcast or reading any content posted or shared by the Mentally Morbid creators, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as psychological advice. The content should not be used in lieu of medical or psychological advice or any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care. The content here is for entertainment and educational purposes only. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or blog. Please consult healthcare professionals for any medical or psychological care.
Tits. Do it.
Honestly, I liked the first one you did.
What? That's Annie, that's Kinsey, and I'm Kayla.
The Itchy and Scratchy Show.
What? No.
Guys, this is our first podcast.
I know.
Oh, right. I forgot we were talking about that.
No.
Annie, you take the lead.
No. This is our first podcast.
Welcome to the show.
It's going to be great.
Can you sing a song from The Greatest Showman, Kayla?
No.
What could go
And
wrong?
Sing to me.
No. Copyrighted. We don't have the money for that.
I don't have money to be sued.
So, I'm Annie.
Oh, I'm Kayla.
I'm Kinsey.
Are you?
Do you know that, or was that a question?
I didn't know. Are we actually introducing ourselves like that?
I mean, it came with a question mark, so you tell us. And, moving along. Okay, so maybe we'll plan an intro.
No, we don't have to plan it. We can just go for
Like,
it.
we'll do another one.
No. I like that one.
We'll just edit it a little bit. Just tweak it a bit. We'll put a period at the end of Kinsey's name.
Welcome to the first podcast episode of Mentally Morbid.
We're going with that name, right?
I'm
I hope
Kayla.
so. Too late now.
That's me. I'm Annie.
I'm Kinsey.
Oh
With
my
a
gosh, you
period.
knew who she was that time.
What?
I said you knew who you were that time.
I think we should do first and last name because I like how they sound in My Favorite Murder when they do that.
First and last names?
My name is Kinsey Pochio, and I am here live.
Scourgia, Samantha, Annie. Social security number 2. Actually, in my high school career, I was going to try and be the school secretary. I didn't get it. I wasn't popular. Okay, shit happens. And my slogan was, "I'm Annie with no E. Vote for me." So that's. I'm gonna go with that intro. I didn't get it, guys.
You know, but it is an obnoxious fact about you that makes sense.
I always say that my mom had too much of an epidural to know that there was an E at the end.
She named you while she was in labor?
I've never had kids. I don't know how it works.
Didn't she also name you Samantha so that
Her name
people would
is
look at her?
Samantha.
Yes, she named me Samantha so that when I walked into the room when I was going for a job, people thought that a male was going to come in, and then in walks this 6-foot tall female. And then I'm like, Mom, why would I put Sam on an application? First of all, I don't even go by Sam. Second of all, I have to put my legal name. What?
Right. No,
Right.
it makes sense when you don't think about it.
But then there's
For sure.
also Kinsey Pochio.
Pinocchio. Chichi.
Ooh, Cocoa
And then
Puffs.
Kayla Preston. You were still on my phone as Kayla Preston. All this
McFadden.
time.
Thank you, though.
Never saw that wedding, did we, Kinsey?
I'm pretty sure you're not actually married because I wasn't there.
Well, if I did it again, you
think
still
it
wouldn't be invited. So now what?
Oh, shit. And moving along. So, Kayla, I think you were sharing first today. What a great way to introduce the podcast.
Kenzie's favorite thing is weddings.
I took you to a wedding.
Fight. Wait, if we're going to fight, we have to do it on camera. Kinsey's I'm ready to fight face is so much better than Kinsey's voice when she fights.
Story.
Yeah,
Well, we have to
give a
tell
story.
everybody what we're doing. What is the
Story.
podcast about?
Do we know? We don't know what we're doing. We're just here to sit down and listen to a story. I heard it was story time.
It's tea time?
Tea time. Tequila
Do you
time.
have tea amongst your 7 drinks behind you?
Actually, this is a refresher green tea with strawberry dragon fruit.
Like a bougie bitch.
No vodka this time.
Stories that relate back to psychology in some sort of way, whether
Some
it be
sort of
weird.
way.
Well, you know, like it's loose.
Like really, really loose.
Yeah, just like don't believe us.
Like they'll believe us.
Do you want to tell the story now?
I think the best way to explain what we're doing is to tell the story, and then we can go back and be like, see, this is what we're doing. Remember how it took Kinsey 4 days to figure it out?
I still don't understand.
She's still waiting for the example.
Okay, well, I guess we'll just start.
Kinsey's FOMO is why she's here. She has no idea what we're actually going to do today.
Okay, well, do you know what language acquisition is?
French?
Yes.
That's the thing we have where we learn how to use language.
Oh my gosh, look at her go.
Dictionary?
She Googled it real quick.
I didn't. It's a developmental term. I remember.
Okay, good for you. Well, for everybody who doesn't know, language acquisition is time span for which you can learn and comprehend language.
I thought you said, where does the word acquisition come from?
No. Do you know what language acquisition is?
Oh, I actually do, because I'm going to teach about that at Mercer this semester again.
Right, that's why I know what it is too.
Please proceed. I thought when I said French, that's why. God, dumb. Go ahead.
I think you just said that after I read the definition, but okay.
We're good.
Okay, great. Okay,
Language
so
acquisition.
understanding language dates back to the early philosophers like Plato, who thought that language was an innate skill, and Sanskrit, remember those? Grammarists.
Remember those?
Yeah, Sanskrit, remember? Hinduism? No? Okay. Maybe it's just me.
I really think we need to title the story and give our sources at the beginning.
Okay, well, my story is called Genie, August 23rd, 2022.
Okay, thank you.
You know an interesting fact about Plato?
Genie in a bottle.
No. Plato. Do you know how to remember the philosophers in order? You know, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle?
Why would I know that?
I don't know. SPA. S-P-A. SPA.
Why do you know that?
I don't know if that's accurate. That's what I remember from high school from a test. But go ahead.
Wait,
Plato.
who's S?
Socrates.
Oh.
Like Socratic questioning.
Okay, now who taught what?
Who's the guy who had the bird wings and flew into the sun?
That was Icarus from Greek mythology.
I remember watching him. You guys remember the Hercules TV show? The cartoon TV show? I remember that.
Wait, no, I don't remember that. But I do.
Yes, I do.
Interesting that you...
Yes, it hit the memory bank. Oh my God, I can't remember that was the thing.
Wait, I want to Google it. What is it? Never mind.
No, I love that we went from Plato to Icarus.
Icarus is mythology. Plato was a real philosopher.
Icarus wasn't real?
No.
But Lucan, I'm gonna loop us back. So Plato, language acquisition.
Literally the first sentence, and we're already all the way fucked up.
Listen, we're gonna need about 3 episodes each time, one half of a story.
Okay, well, the Sanskrit grammarians thought that language was something that was God-given. Okay?
Debatable.
Early on in psychotherapy, people started to wonder more about language development and whether it was nature or nurture.
Start it again.
That assisted in the ability to learn. Huh?
Turn the recording off. Let's go back.
No, we keep going.
Don't tell me what to do. Annie, how many drinks do you have?
4. I have a water, a coffee, an aha, and I finished the refresher, so I guess technically 3.
You're drinking all at the same time?
No, I finished the refresher, so now I'm on to the coffee.
They all were all the way almost done.
I haven't drank the coffee yet. That was next. Please proceed.
There is a hypothesis of the critical period hypothesis or the sensitive period hypothesis that claims there is an ideal time window of brain development to acquire language in a linguistically rich environment.
So this is kind of like when you're drinking and you have to pee, but you hold it until there's that window time where you can't anymore, because after you do that, it's just a bad time, right? Like you just got to keep peeing and peeing. You've broken the seal. Kind
of. I feel like it's the opposite of that.
No, you're right. But also, it's a good analogy.
Sure, for anyone who's twisted.
Where is the interesting part of this story?
Oh, that wasn't even planned. We actually talked to Kinsey about how to move the story along if we feel like we're taking too long. That was a comment we talked about. Interesting that you would start that.
You know, we shouldn't have put it past her. Anyway, further language acquisition becomes more difficult and effortful the older a person gets. So, there was an argument through behaviorism that language is learned through operant conditioning. Anybody want to tell us what that is, kids?
It almost hurts. I want to so bad.
Okay, where language is reinforced through rewards. Remember, our audience doesn't know what half these are.
I know, but like you took it, you said, does anybody want to? And I said, it hurts, I almost want to. And then you said it. And then it was just, it's like you reach the orgasm, but you don't quite get to the orgasm.
You should have raised your hand.
I want the talking stick next time.
Okay. Well, I'm holding it right now.
Yeah, you're taking it, aren't you?
Okay, so for example, a child that wants to be held learns up by being picked up. So like they are constantly being reinforced. Further research was done with chimpanzees in the 70s. This is before ethics, everyone. Just saying.
Oh, there's no research ethics then. They didn't exist.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I understand that they still do research. Anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. In the 70s, attempting to teach them sign language and acquire language that way. But understanding the language acquisition in humans was difficult to test due to not having a subject.
Oh, so you're saying you can't just like put a kid out and not talk to them for 5 years?
True. Yeah, until November of 1970, when a mother who was attempting to apply for disability benefits after leaving her child's father for near blindlessness.
Can you work on speaking better before the next podcast?
Kinsey, remember when you were like, when's the good part? I feel like we're about to get there.
I am actually starting to get interested. For a minute there, I felt like she was lecturing me, but now I'm getting into it.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to people who are listening. You're just here, honestly.
Guess what? So far, no one is listening. We have 0 followers.
I'm between the aggression.
What about the podcast?
Hold on. I do have. This is trigger warning central, where I'm about to get to. Okay, so this is like abuse, childhood abuse, neglect.
And we need to put that somewhere clear on the episode description.
We will, but I am letting you know that this is a trigger warning for some people.
Let's add that to the disclaimer. I'll make a note.
Okay, great. November 1970, a mother who is attempting to apply for disability benefits after leaving her child's father for near blindness. Why is that hard to
Christ. I
can't say it. Accidentally walked into the social service office instead, so she couldn't tell what the sign said.
Wait, where was she trying to go?
The disability office.
And she went to social services.
Correct.
Okay. It's like the beginning of a joke, though, right?
It sounds like it, but no, it's actually the beginning of a really terrible story. Thank you for pointing that out.
You can't make jokes about these people, Annie.
Who are these people, Kinsey?
People with disabilities, differently
able. People who can't read.
We kind of make fun of the mom. She was the worst, okay? But also, like, she was a victim too, kind of. I don't really. It's actually kind of a question whether she was truly a victim or if she was like an accomplice.
Okay. Well, if you tell me the story, I can help you decide.
Okay. So the service worker immediately knew something was wrong when she saw the kid that was with her, who she assumed was 7 or 8 and maybe possibly autistic. After more questioning by her and her manager, they learned that this child was actually 13 years old.
Oh, no.
Yeah, real bad. And they both immediately called the police because social services, how unfortunate, but also fortunate to end up in the social service office. So the police responded to the call and they found that the girl who they gave the pseudonym Genie had been severely abused, neglected, and socially isolated. When they investigated the house, Genie spent most of her life strapped to a child's toilet seat, bound in a crib with her arms and legs immobilized. Her father forbade anyone from interacting with her, providing her with almost zero stimulation of any kind, and left her severely malnourished.
Why? Is the dad in this story after that?
I don't really want to talk about him because not interested. I think that he went to prison though, but I would have to Google that. I don't really know.
Like even hearing it without like any details besides what we give it, like it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, just to even think about like how do you just I'm just gonna do this to another human being. Like I can't even hear it without getting chills of like discomfort.
Yeah.
Right. And she had a brother. I think she had a brother, and the brother did not go through this same neglect. And
That's
so
like the thing that happened in A Child Called It. You remember those books?
Yes, I do remember that.
She only abused the one kid.
Annie, did you ever read that?
No.
That book is wild. Like anyway.
I've had several clients like that though.
Okay. So psychologists and linguists quickly learned that the opportunity for research had emerged with Genie since she had developed no language skills due to her severe neglect. So
she's 13 right now, and she's 13 at this point.
And
she's 13.
Can't. So this is why you're saying ethics didn't exist, because she can't consent.
Yes, correct. You'll learn more about why ethics are involved as well, because
but also
after being taken from her mother, Genie was placed in the Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where she would be subject of several tests and studies. They found she was 4'6" and only weighed 59 pounds when she was found. She had severe physical complications, including her inability to swallow most foods. She was extremely weak and could barely stand. Her fine motor skills were that of a 2-year-old, and although she had normal vision in both of her eyes, she had trouble focusing on objects that were farther than 10 feet away, which ended up being the exact measurements of the room that she was locked in.
So if I remember from my one-time teaching and 10 years ago, you have neurons and you have, neuronal pathways that will just decay, essentially, if you don't use them. It's like muscles, right? It's like your muscle, which actually goes back to neurons and nerves, but your neurons will just...
Pruning.
Yep.
Pruning, thank you, yes. Like you don't use it. This shit's wild. But, it's even hard. Like, how do you study that as a doctor? Like, how do you look at this and go, okay, we're just going to take this case, this child being neglected, like, as hell, right? Like, it's not even just neglect. Like, it's just straight up abuse. And you're like, you know what? I'm just going to study what's going on here. How do you separate that at that point? How do you not just become mush?
I can't help but think, like, about the animals in the zoo. I wonder if they're able to see farther, or if they can only see as far as we let them see at this point, because they're just in captivity.
That's a good question. Good brain.
My brain thought thank you.
I mean, there's a reason that they struggle with fertility and stuff when they're in captivity, right? I mean, they struggle to reproduce, and I mean, they generally have like more health problems just in general?
Well, they live longer, but their skills suck.
I think they live longer because no one's there eating them.
Right.
Correct. Good job.
If in the wild, someone would eat.
Or something. Think about the moose. I thought I saw a moose the other day, by the way.
You didn't. We live in the South.
I was like, oh my God, a moose.
Has a remote office in the winter area.
She does telehealth in Canada.
No, they're in like the mountains, aren't?
I think like Wisconsin and Minnesota. And
do we know this? Or are we guessing?
Are there mice here?
I literally said, I think.
Drive through Colorado. Where are the moose?
I know they have elk. I don't know about moose.
What is the difference between a...
Oh, okay.
Size.
Tell me.
I can't.
Size.
Elk versus moose. Oh, this
moose can swim, though. I do know that.
I'm telling you, it's the size.
How to tell the difference, a quick guide. So elk are smaller and a different color, it appears.
So they're completely different.
It's like a different species almost.
Weird how that happens. This is like a lion and a tiger comparison, right?
Right, but they can mate. Ligers.
The biggest
elk and moose mate?
The biggest difference is the antlers. Guys, there's a third category. Caribou.
Oh, caribou.
That's what that coffee place is named after. Caribou
Oh,
Coffee.
that's what I was like about to say. Why do I know caribou? It's the coffee.
What
I don't
coffee?
have that good coffee.
Coffee.
What
So-
coffee place?
Caribou
Caribou.
coffee.
Thank you.
But going back to pruning and Genie,
Caribous have white necks.
was there more? You said something happened to Mom.
No, I'm still telling my story. She's still stuck on caribou chests.
Caribou!
I think maybe we should loop back here.
Focus,
Can my
Fox.
name be Caribou for the whole podcast?
Do we do it back? Is this like if you see the? Is this?
No, just
Waterfall?
focus, Fox. I'm taking the talking stick back. Thank you. Okay, so from the start, Genie showed a small amount of responsiveness to nonverbal information, including gestures and facial expressions from other people, and made reasonably good eye contact. However, her demeanor was completely devoid of any expressions or discernible body language, and she could only non-verbally get across a very few basic needs.
What does that mean, discernible body language?
So, from what I read, she was like fearful of like, I guess like certain postures and like
Is it
certain.
cerebral body language? Is that what you said?
No.
Distinguishable body.
Well, I mean, I guess if you're thinking about like what you naturally do, because there's going to be some things that are reflexes when you're born, right? So, like if you're hungry, you automatically would, suckle or something on certain things. So maybe it's just things like that that were even very infantile. No.
No, I think you're right. I just think that it was just very obvious that she wasn't typical.
Yeah. So they're saying that she could communicate certain things, but not in your typical ways.
Right, and it was only very basic needs. Like, she doesn't know how to ask for wants. It's just like basic.
So when we're like comparable to Helen Keller, like you have not only just degeneration of the verbal and just the whole verbal cortex, you have complete degeneration also of her body.
Well,
right?
yeah,
So
she was
she's
strapped
also-
to a chair.
Right. So like muscular wise, like her body is broken down. Mentally, her body's broken down.
Yeah, they like described, and you can find like this picture of her on Google. Like, if they describe her walk as like a bunny walk, because she's like, her arms are like almost folded in, like her muscle
atrophy. Is that what it is? Muscular atrophy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like her body was so like tense and tight from not like exercising or just moving, not even exercising, just like being able to move.
Right.
fluidly.
Just basic movements.
Right. Her body was like constricted almost.
Well, and that's super easy to do anyways. That's why the reason that venison and stuff is so like veal and all that is so tender is because
Right.
they let them move. And then also that's the same reason you have to like regularly roll over people who are bedbound and stuff. Otherwise their muscles literally degenerate.
What about veal? I don't know anything about that.
Veal
It's so terrible.
Yeah, I would never. To our podcast listeners, I am a proud pescatarian, but even if I wasn't, I would never eat veal. Veal is baby cows that are literally trapped. They cannot move like more than I think it's 5x5 sort of distance, because if they move too much, their muscles get developed and then they're not as tender to eat. They're literally just trapped in a pen until they're slaughtered.
Right?
That's awful.
Yeah, I remember reading that when I was in like 7th grade because my dad ordered veal. And so I looked it up to see it. And that was the first time I felt something. That was also the last time. But
Wow.
No, that's awful. I didn't even know that.
yeah, it's bad.
That's why people pay a lot of money for it, because it takes a lot to make sure that it's like
Not moving.
basically they have to trap it for an extended period of time. Like they live in a small pen until they're ready to get killed.
It's also the number one reason that I think about going vegetarian half the time. Like that's the thing I think of, and I'm like, oh God, should I? I should.
I would say the same thing for chickens though. Most chicken farms are like disgusting. I saw a thing on the other day. Where it was like, chickens are constantly dying. They're constantly getting trampled. They're disgusting.
When I see chickens on the truck, it makes me feel real sad.
Wait, so going back to the bunny walk.
Anyway, she has a bunny walk because she hasn't been able to like move at all. So she clearly distinguishes speaking from other sounds, but remains mostly completely silent and unresponsive to speech. And any responses she gave were with using nonverbal signals as well.
That means that the Broca's area, which is in the production of sound, and the Wernicke's area, which is the reception of sound, were differently developed.
Why do you know that?
I don't know. Why does she know that? Because she's studying for her class.
I know things. I don't sound smart.
I don't believe you.
Like, I also teach child development, and we don't really talk about the brain in that class. So
I don't want to tell you. I actually read outside of you guys sometimes. I know things. I just don't sound smart.
I'm surprised you know how to read, first of all.
I read words once, and it was a very interesting experience. Changed my fucking world.
it was the one time when she read about the veal, the only time she also had feelings, and she actually hasn't done anything since that day.
Haven't read, haven't felt.
You would be a whole person if you read more.
I don't really want to be a whole person. When I hear from you guys in our group chats about how sad the days are, I'm just going to be half a person and be ignorant.
You do seem happier that way.
Argue with me.
By name alone, I am nothing but a wood boy, right? Pinocchio. I'm not even real either.
We're not even vampires anymore. We're just wooden boys.
That is my namesake. That's where I belong. Annie is a dirty bitch. You said at the very beginning they were going to the office because she was leaving the dad, or no?
So she had tried to leave the dad several times, multiple times. And I think at this point she wanted to leave, but she did eventually go back. So she was just going back and forth. But at that time, she was trying to get disability so that she could support her and her 2 kids.
They talk about that in Maid, that Netflix show. I don't know if you guys
watched. I love Maid.
But they talk about like I don't know if that's true, but they said it takes like 11 times to leave a domestic violence situation. Yeah, right. And like most people fail like several times before.
That show was painfully accurate. As far as like the system being broken.
I've never watched it, but that's a number, somewhere around that number is what I've heard before.
It is really good, Annie.
And also a really good description of like the cycle of violence, right? Like their relationship as a whole and his consistent back and forth based on his addiction and stuff like that. Like I think if he had been sober, he probably would have been fine. And he obviously cared about his child a lot, but he was not in a good place to take care of her.
Well, that's the sad part about this stuff. You know, like when we're like even reading or listening to this, like you automatically, I mean, as therapists, like I think all of our wheels are probably going, I can see why this would lead to this. And that's what's tough is you think of the reasons and you can clearly see if they had a different life, they wouldn't have done the things they did to the other people. Some of them, not all the time. Some of it is just brain, but.
I agree with a lot of that, but I do think at this level of abuse, I would say like that's got to be some level of like psychopathy, sociopathy sort of level, right? Like to like torture somebody like that.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that he is functioning like that didn't happen to him.
Right.
It's just repeating patterns. It's not just a generation.
So I think that there was like, he was like it explained that she had been acting kind of like atypical towards the beginning of her life. And that's when he like shut her up in that room and like tied her down and stuff because she started acting atypical. Now it's very hard to distinguish at that point after they had rescued her if it was abuse related or if she was like neurodivergent.
Okay, so this is probably more so like either a shame thing where he was trying to hide, or this is like a religious thing where he thought she was like possessed or something. Like he thought something was
or just like a bother. It sounds like she could have just been a bother as well.
Yeah.
I think it was like a mix of all of that. But yeah, it did like mention some sort of like shame. He was like shameful of her.
Which makes sense why he didn't do that to the brother, which is something, again, going back to A Child Called It, that I just never understood about that situation because there was nothing differentiating that boy from his siblings. She just didn't like him.
It just happens more often than people think where like one kid is targeted.
But the scary part is how this happens right next to you. Like y'all hear about the family that it was like, God, like 7 kids or 7+ kids?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you know that some of those kids got placed into another foster family and then got abused again?
You're talking about the kids that escaped and like their parents only fed them,
sister got out and alerted the neighbor or something. Like
and some of the kids were like in their 20s.
Yes. Yeah. The 3 women that were taken as children and then raped and then had the abuser's child. those were right next to people in a freaking neighborhood.
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
The parents with the kids, it was saying like they went on vacations every year. Like they were perfectly quote unquote normal people who just decided that their children were
Garbage.
Garbage, I guess is a great way to,
That's how they treated them. I don't know. That's this kind of like these stories always make me just question. Like, there's the part of living that you just question humanity completely. Like, how can things like this exist? Like, you're just going about your day, you go to the gym, you go to work, you come home, and then you hear the story, and you're like, how can this happen? And nobody knows. Like, you're literally just living your life, and meanwhile, somebody is in misery.
Well, the thing is like, then you think about like their parents, like the parents' parents. They knew that they had 2 kids. What happened to the baby? No one's asking about the baby. And so that's where, I mean, for 13 years, that's insane. So anyway, David Reigler, I think that's how you say his name. He was head of the research team at the children's hospital that she was taken to. And so, again, no ethics. He took custody of her.
As one does with a subject in their research study.
Right.
This is my child now.
He took custody of her, and she lived in his house for almost 4 years after her first stay with a different staff member was hindering her progress. So, like, they noticed that, like, she wasn't making any progress. And that person started becoming too, like, helicoptery and wasn't, I don't know. It just got weird with that first researcher that took her. So he took her, and his wife is actually a social worker and had a graduate degree in human development. So it like wasn't the worst place for her to go, and they ended up loving her, like were her parents for those.
It's like Matilda.
It's almost like Matilda, yeah. So when they took her in, she had obviously not just like language development difficulties. She also had severe like behavioral problems. Like she was hitting puberty and all of that, and like socially she doesn't know not to touch herself. So she was like masturbating in public and like doing like really not socially acceptable things. But that's like a whole different story aside from language. But they started working on her ability to learn language. And by mid-1975, she could accurately name most objects that she encountered, and clearly knew more words than she like used all the time. But she had much more difficulty with learning like basic grammar. As an adult, like when you're going in to try to learn a different language, you can learn the names of objects, but like putting them in a sentence is...
Do we ever hear from her in this description?
She never learns.
Okay, that's what I was gonna. Okay, because you get thinking about, like, if you don't have language, if you don't have the words to be able to describe something, consider how it changes your memory of something. Like, you can think back to childhood, right? But you don't really have memories before you can speak.
But it's hard to tell her cognitive abilities at that point.
Right, but I wonder
if she developed the language. I don't know if she like would be cognitively available.
Right. So I wonder like how she would even form memories differently because she was never able to acquire the language. Because it's not even just being able to speak it, it's being able to understand it as well. Like I wonder if she was able to understand all of the language that she would hear. Because she would hear them speaking, but would she understand the context, you know?
I don't know. But so by mid-1975, there were still many pieces of language that she had not acquired. Although she could understand and produce utterances, she still primarily spoke in short phrases. And one of the examples that they gave is Ball Belong Hospital.
So you're talking about early toddler years. If I go back to the chart, you're talking about early toddler years. There's something that's called something, by the way, that kind of language. But where you're not using any prepositions, you're just using like noun and verb.
It's like super early in like language development.
Right.
So despite the clear increases in her conversational competence, the scientists wrote that it remained very low compared to normal people. And some of the researchers ultimately concluded that because she had not learned a first language before the critical period had ended, she was unable to fully acquire language. So that was like the end result of their research.
So that's their guesstimate.
Right. So over time, like more tests and brain scans were completed, they lost funding, so they couldn't even like really go into much more detail with her. And so like throughout the entire time she was kept by this family, her mom was in constant contact with her over the 4 years. And after she turned 18, her mom wanted custody,
So
probably for financial reasons.
I was going to say, does her mom love her? Or?
It's hard to say.
Okay, so this goes back to you saying you're not sure if the mom is a villain or not.
Right. So within a few months of taking care of Genie by herself, her mom got really overwhelmed. And then she contacted the California Department of Health to find care for Genie behind the researchers' backs, even though Genie like developed like a strong rapport and relationship with the Wranglers. She like the mom just kind of like gave her away to the Department of Health.
And at this point, she was how old?
18.
She didn't caretake for her when she was under 13 because she was tied to a fucking chair.
Right.
And so when she's actually a human being who can move around and do things for her own autonomy, maybe not even for herself, but do things of her own, that was too much for her.
She probably was more work. She probably had to actually watch her get up and do things and clean up after her and help her. Yeah. It's crazy how that works, huh?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you see it with foster care constantly, right? Where when foster care steps in and they finally expect things out of them and hold them to standards, they suddenly are ready to go, maybe I don't want to be a parent anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So after she was surrendered to the Department of Health, she was transferred to a lot of different foster homes. The environment in her new placement was extremely rigid and gave her less access to her like favorite toys and activities, and they rarely allowed for her mother to visit, which I don't know why mom's still visiting. I don't know. But soon after she moved, they began to subject her to extreme physical and emotional abuse, resulting in both physical and mental strain, which reverted all of her progress. So then she became silent again. And it was reported that like the strongest like incident that happened was that the foster home or whoever was in her care or was taking care of her severely beat her for throwing up, and told her that if she did it again, they would never let her see her mother, which made her terrified of ever opening her mouth. So she like kept her mouth shut, and she became scared of eating and speaking, and then she withdrew back into herself. So all those 4 years of progress and developing relationships. And
well, how did they find out about that?
One of the researchers who was continuing to do like tests on her after they lost funding, so like they were still visiting her and doing stuff with her, he realized that her conditions were unsafe and he reported it, which caused her to move more times. And so she was moved from foster family to foster family, and her living arrangements changed so often that, I mean, it just traumatized her.
Well, I mean, it completely, I mean, it's like every type of abuse that, I mean, you got to figure when we talk about the things that affect children, right? We talk about instability, right? Maybe some neglect, like just the very bare minimum of the things that can really change the trajectory of a child's development. And we're talking about these small, minute things. And then you have this person who undergoes all these types of neglect and abuse and just torture. I mean, it's just torture at that point. It's not even abuse, it's just torture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think Genie is still alive. And
Really?
I really think so. So over time, there were complications about her custody, and one of the researchers failed to contact the state about continuing to be her legal guardian, and the state awarded Genie's mother custody, and her mother then cut off researchers from looking further into her. eventually they were able to visit her, like find her and start visiting her, but ultimately she is now a ward of the state and resides in an undisclosed location in California.
Wow.
Undisclosed, probably because all the people that would try and go and harass
They
her.
released her real name. I'm not going to include it. I don't want to talk about, I don't want to like breach all that, but like
Reinforce HIPAA confidentiality rights being taken away from somebody.
right. Well, you can, like literally, like her name was, I guess, leaked. I don't know. Like basically people know who she is now, and they would, if they tried hard enough, they'd be able to find her.
That's so screwed up.
Yeah. I don't know how old she is. I'm going to look that up.
Born in 1957.
Yeah, but I'm bad at math.
So she'd be
So 33 plus 22? 55?
65.
65.
65.
Ah, old days.
That's so
People.
recent.
Two wrong answers.
Wait, am I wrong?
No, Kinsey and I both gave a different answer. Both were wrong.
65 is young for all of that to like be like that happened so recently. I forget how young psychotherapy is and how young like brain research
And
is.
ethics.
And also
and
like
ethics.
multiple levels of like IRBs and stuff that you have to go through now to even like touch humans. Like the amount of hoops that I've had to jump through just to do a dissertation study where like people go to therapy and then answer a survey about how they're feeling. Like I can't even imagine what they were doing to her.
Right, and it sounds like a ton of different researchers had access to her.
Yes, and realistically, they wouldn't be able to do that now. Like there would be a limit. They all wouldn't get approved. Blah 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 blah. You can't have her in your home. That
Definitely
is
not.
a relationship. Like all these things that just are like huge red flags. But I feel like I want to say the IRB is even younger than that. Man,
I would say it would have to be if they. I mean, you think about like Tuskegee Institute and all. I mean, I would assume that the College Review Board would have to, because it's a college. It's college based, right?
What does IRB stand for those of us who are dumb?
International Review Board. I don't know if it's college based, but it wasn't made until 74. So, see, I don't know. This says federal regulations for human people, like protection of human research subjects. So, I don't know if it's just for college.
Huh.
Well, I think isn't it college based though? Like you have to go through the college or something to do it, or is it a broader?
You have to go through the IRB for any research that involves humans.
So the colleges go to the IRB then.
There are college level IRBs. So like mine is gone, like my research is through Florida State's IRB, but there's also bigger IRBs.
Gotcha.
Like,
this is so like you have, when we go back to ethics, right? So you have teleological, deontological, right? So means justifies the ends, or there's just right and wrong, right? So that's two different ways of looking at it. So if you apply it and you think about like the Nuremberg trials, right? So you have the Nazis where they get all this medical information from torturing their victims, from studying people that had absolutely no choice, doing terrible things. And then actually, the doctors actually went through it after, World War II ended and Hitler was killed and all. And they actually take the medical information and use it and apply it, right? So that was a big ethical debate of, do we actually use this? And I think about this kind of thing where, ethics was completely overblown and not even considered. And think about the information that was helped. And like, where would she have been if the doctor hadn't taken her in illegally?
Yeah. Either at the children's hospital. Like, I think that was probably the best place for her at that time. Because, I mean, think about children's hospitals back then.
Yeah. But would she even been in a children's hospital at that point? Or would she have been in an asylum?
Yeah, I don't know.
She probably would have been in an asylum, but like realistically, I mean, realistically, playing devil's advocate to the mom, it sounds to me like having some sort of in-home care would have been very beneficial for her, because it sounds like the mom wanted a relationship, but maybe didn't know how to go about that. And mom was probably also abused.
No, I get that, and I agree. I don't know. It is very hard to tell what's up with the mom.
Right. I'm not saying mom's a good person, but she was in worse situations after leaving mom. So maybe just providing her, like, and that's, I think, what social services does right when they have the ability to, right? Like giving her the resources she needs to keep her daughter safe in whatever capacity can.
The goal is always going to be reunification when possible.
I'm not saying mom should have had custody, but it sounds like no one should be trusted with this woman's custody because they all treated her like shit.
Mhm.
Well, and there's even the mental capacity, because I think about people I work with where they don't have the mental capacity to be parents. Like they just don't have the capacity. It's not about their willingness. They're great people. They have loving hearts, but they unfortunately were just born with disabilities, and they do not have the capacity to be able to care for somebody else. So that even if they were assisted, the children still cannot live in the home. So yeah, maybe visitation with the mom, but full blown custody at that point, devil's advocate or not, you lost the rights. Like you have the ability to see that your child was not even just not thriving, but was literally tied to a chair. If you can't tell right from wrong there.
No, you're right.
Right.
And I also, I mean, children with disabilities. I did a abuse statistics lecture a couple years ago, and like children with disabilities predominantly make up any sort of abuse reports.
Yeah.
Like 90% of, it's probably not 90. That's probably an overestimation. But most of the kids that are abused, it's because they have some sort of differently abled thing going on, whatever that is, whether it's autism or ADD or an actual like physical disability. Like it's, they're abused all the time, and I feel like that's what the system had going on here. Is people are more likely to take it out on people that can't stand up for themselves or take care of themselves.
Well, and that's the hard part is not only, they can't stand up or take care of, but like you mentioned, like it's the stress on the family. So you have that whole cyclical problem that occurs where the child is, of course, going to be more to handle, and the parents are going to be more overburdened and more likely to be stressed and unhealthy themselves because it's harder and more expensive. And most people don't have the money to just take off work. They know self care when you have children. So imagine no self care when you have children with disabilities.
That's a really screwed up story, though. Good first pick.
Yeah.
Welcome to Mentally Morbid, where you hear about the stories that make you uncomfy and not sleep.
Yeah.
It's like I treat my dog better than they treat their child.
Yeah.
I
So
treat my couch better.
most of
That's
the
true.
information I got was from a Wikipedia article, and there's a book about Genie that I read in undergrad, and that's where I got my idea. The book is called Genie, but I just can't think. I don't know who the author is.
I'm gonna add it to my Amazon cart right now.
Russ Reimer,
Thank you, Mr.
Russrymer.
Wait. Not RHY?
Right. There's no H.
Was his mother also under epidural?
Maybe.
So Kayla, that's the end of the story. Nothing else.
The end.
I want to thank you for the gut wrenching anxiety that I'm going to drive home with today.
You're welcome.
Yes, that was good, but also terrible.
Yeah, very disturbing. I should have known better. I don't like gory things or torture or anything. I avoid those parts. Like Saw movies, they're just uncomfortable. I don't watch them.
Okay, so you want to do this podcast? Is what I hear you say?
Oh, mine's going to be about something way different.
I'm like
I've
aliens.
heard a little bit about it. It's different.
Speaking of, so we have one next week. It's my story, right?
Yep, Annie goes next.
Yeah. So next week's my story. Not quite sure which one I'm going to pick yet. I have one of two in my head. Probably not going to go into a terribly sad story this next
Sorry.
time. Maybe I'm just going to bring the dopamine and serotonin levels up just a bit, like Dolly Parton's tits. So yeah, so that was the first episode. We did it.
Congratulations, everyone. Good job.
So I'm Annie with no E.
Kayla with a YLA.
Kinsey with an E.
And this is
Mentally Morbid.
Oh, I was supposed to say it too. Mentally morbid.